I now call the August 1st, 2023 Finance Committee meeting to order at 6:45. Consideration of claims. Chair would entertain a motion for the approval of the claims.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion for the consideration of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,031,134.46. Manual check in the amount of $6,000. Payroll and liabilities for July 28th, 2023 in the amount of $214,404.83 for a total of $1,251,539.29.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments or discussion on the claims? In that case, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Is there anything additional that the committee needs to review or discuss? All right, thank you. In that case, we will adjourn at 6:46.
I call the August 1st, 2023 regular meeting of the Riverton City Council to order at 7 p.m. Councilmember Bailey has agreed to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Councilmember Larson has agreed to give us the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our eternal Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity to serve in Riverton and to be part of the community. We're thankful for the attendance of our citizens. They're valuable, and we need their input. We would ask this night, Father, that Thou would watch over our first responders, our police department, our firefighters, especially this time of year for the firefighters. Father, we would also ask that You would bless us with insight and understanding that we might do the right thing in helping our citizens with any of these problems that are presented before us. We ask Thy guidance, and we ask this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Would the Administrative Services Director please conduct the roll call?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilwoman Carla Borders.
Here?
Councilwoman Lindsay Cox. Councilman Mike Bailey.
Here.
Councilman Dean Peranto.
Here.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilwoman Christy Salisbury. Here. And Mayor Tim Hancock.
I am here. I would entertain a motion to excuse Councilwoman Lindsay Cox from tonight's meeting.
So moved. Second.
Councilman Peranto with the motion, Councilman Bailey with the second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. I declare we do have a quorum. I would entertain a motion for the approval as the agenda is presented. I would note, I would ask for this motion to remove item 9. Officer Cassandra Barnes will do the swearing in next meeting.
Yes.
Your Honor, so moved.
Second.
Councilwoman Borders with the motion, Councilman Bailey with the second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. Communication from the floor. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council regarding an item that's scheduled for a public hearing will be given an opportunity to speak during that public hearing. I would note that even though we are not currently scheduled for a public hearing for the Presbyterian Church second reading of Ordinance 23010, you will still be given an opportunity to speak during that consideration of that ordinance. So you don't have to come up now. You can wait until we get to that point in the agenda. But anyone that wants to speak about something that's not scheduled for a public hearing or not regarding the Presbyterian Church rezone, feel free to come on up. Please tell us your name, identify yourself. I'd ask you for individuals, keep your time to about 5 minutes. If you're part of a group, split it up between you for about 10 minutes. Anyone who wants to speak?
Seeing none, Your Honor, that we would close public discussion.
Okay. Guess we didn't have it as something we voted on. We'll just move on to the next item of the agenda. Thank you. All right. Administrative Services Director, if you could please read the consent agenda items by title only.
Yes, Your Honor. Approval of the minutes, July 18th, 2023, regular council meeting. Approval of the minutes, August 1st, 2023, Finance Committee meeting. Approval of the Finance Committee recommendations, August 1st, 2023. Approval of the municipal court report for the month of July 2023. Open container permit application for Teton Therapy for a company party at J.C. Park, August 12th, 2023, from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Open container permit application for the Riverton Downtowners Main Street Alliance for their Fall Harvest Festival on Main Street, September 23rd, 2023, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., and replat of the Modelers Park.
Any items requiring further discussion?
Your Honor.
Yes.
The Finance Committee met earlier this evening and agreed to pay consideration of claims to be paid in the amount of $1,031,134.46. Manual check in the amount of $6,000. Payroll and liabilities for 7/28/23 in the amount of $214,404.83 for a total of $1,251,539.29.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Councilman Bailey with the motion, Councilman Peranto with the second. Any discussion or amendments?
Your Honor, I need to abstain from any warrants paid to Traveling Computers or WyoNet.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right, since we don't have item 9 on the agenda, moving on to consideration of ordinance 23008, third and final reading, Riverview Cove subdivision rezone. Mr. Miller, if you could give us a report on this item.
Yes, Your Honor, 1 second of,
Just get comfortable in front of that microphone tonight.
yeah, tonight is the Mike Miller Show for a little while. Wonderful. Your Honor, Council, Riverview Cove was annexed into the city of Riverton in March of 2022. It is a subdivision of 5 lots. 4 of those lots are currently zoned R1 and 1 lot is currently zoned Commercial C1. The 4 lots that are currently zoned R1 were never intended to be R1 in discussions, plat and annexation paperwork. Those 4 lots were intended to be zoned R2A. A clerical error was discovered that those 4 lots had been zoned R1 by ordinance and the ordinance documentation only. Due to this error, it is being petitioned by the city of Riverton to rezone the 4 residential lots from R1 to R2A. Rezone notifications by letter and postage signage have been done with no responses opposing the rezone having been received. The City Planning Commission recommended approval on June 22nd. The first reading at council was July 5th, and the second reading at council was July 18th, passing in all 3. Is a recommendation that City Council approves the third reading of ordinance number 23-008 Riverview Cove subdivision lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 rezone.
Thank you. Would the Administrative Services Director please read ordinance number 23008 by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. An ordinance amending the zoning district map of the city of Riverton, Wyoming, designating the rezone of Riverview Cove subdivisions, lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, city of Riverton, Fremont County, Wyoming, from residential district R1 to residential district R2A.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 23008 on third and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Councilman Peranto with the motion, Councilman Bailey with the second. Any discussion or amendments?
Your Honor, I do notice in section 1 that it says lots 1, 2, 3, and 3. So we might just want to change that, the 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Are we just at a typo there is what we've done?
It is a typo in this version of it. That will be correct. I can get that corrected on approval. Thank you very much.
When we've had it in prior versions,
It was 1, 2, 3, and 4.
you've had it correct? Okay.
Yeah, I believe that this was just a typo in this version.
Okay.
But yes, I'll have a version of that for signature upon approval, of course.
Okay. Thank you for noting that, Councilwoman Borders.
You're welcome.
So the approval today would be with the correction. Okay. Administrative Services Director, if you could please conduct a roll call vote.
Yes, Your Honor. Councilwoman Carla Borders.
Aye.
Councilman Mike Bailey.
Aye.
Councilman Dean Peranto.
Aye.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Aye.
Councilwoman Christy Salisbury.
Aye.
And Mayor Tim Hancock.
I vote aye, and the motion passes. Consideration of ordinance 23009, second reading, Redden edition, plat and annexation. Mr. Miller again, please.
Yes. Your Mayor, Council, the petitioner, Jay Redden, is requesting plat and annexation of the Redden addition. The proposed parcels are already adjacent to the current city limits. The lots are located along Rain Tree Drive, just north of Sandstone Circle. There are 5 lots being proposed for the subdivision, each potentially zoned residential R2A. Utility reviews were sent to all utilities with no exceptions. Neighbors were notified of the annexation with no responses received. A subdivision agreement will be required for the petitioner to install a fire hydrant, but the lots proposed already have access to city services via Raintree Drive itself. City Planning Commission recommended approval on July 6th, and ordinance number 23-009 passed first reading on July 18th by City Council. It is the recommendation at this time that the city adopt on second reading ordinance number 23-009, Redden Edition.
Thank you. Would the Administrative Services Director please read ordinance 23009 by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. An ordinance annexing the Redden Addition, Fremont County, Wyoming, not previously annexed to the city of Riverton, designating the zoning classification of the parcel and amending zoning map to reflect same, and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 23009 on second reading.
So moved.
Second?
Councilman Larson with the motion, second by Councilwoman Borders. Yes? Any discussion? Amendments? Typos?
Didn't see any.
Okay, good. All in favor, say aye.
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 I vote aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. All right, consideration of ordinance 23010, second reading Presbyterian Church. Mr. Miller again, please.
Your Honor, Council. Lots 2 and 3 of the Presbyterian Church Addition Plat are located along Elk Drive on the corner of North Broadway and Elk Drive. The lots are zoned residential R2 and located directly east of Residential District R1 zone. The petitioner, the United Presbyterian Church, is requesting to rezone these lots to Office and Institutional District CO. The United Presbyterian Church is requesting this rezone to facilitate the sale of the aforementioned 2 lots. The potential buyers need the lots to be zoned CO to have their business facilities located on the 2 lots. The intended use by the buyers is for human health facility, specifically a behavioral health facility geared towards family and children. Notices were delivered and a public hearing was held before the Planning Commission pursuant to Riverton Municipal Code 17.04.050. The Commission recommended approval of the proposed rezone on July 6, 2023. The matter was subsequently taken to the City Council as Ordinance 23-010, and a public hearing was held on July 18, 2023. The Council adopted the ordinance on first reading and directed staff to explore alternatives for the Council to explore with the church, the potential buyer, and community members. In addition to the proposed change from Residential District R2 to Commercial District CO, the petitioner and the city may explore the following alternative options for the 2 lots located in the existing R2 zone. A variance. A lot of what we'll talk about here, we've talked about variances, we've talked about conditional use, we've talked about non-conforming use, and so we're going to go through and define each one of those processes just so everybody makes sure that they understands that and then how that relates exactly to what we're dealing with on this property so everybody understands what we're working with. So variances are the relaxation of zoning restrictions applied to a specific property. In brief, when a local government gives a variance, it grants relief from the restriction of a zoning regulation because its enforcement would cause a substantial hardship to the property owner without serving a significant corresponding benefit to the public. Variances are tied to the land and generally come in 2 forms. The first type is an area variance, which provides relief from specific restrictions on how the property can be developed. It relates to issues like building height, lot size, and setback requirements. The second type of variance is a use variance, which permits the property to be developed for a particular use that is otherwise prohibited by the zoning restrictions. Use variances are typically more difficult to obtain than an area variance, since it's generally held that it should not be granted unless it is found on the basis of substantial evidence that the property cannot be reasonably used in a manner consistent with the applicable zoning restrictions. Wyoming Statute 15-1608 establishes power associated by the Board of Adjustment, which is the body established to rule on variance requests. It states, "The board has the power to vary or adjust the strict application of any of the requirements of any ordinance adopted pursuant to this article in the case of any physical condition applying to a lot or building if the strict application would deprive the owner of the reasonable use of the land or building involved. No adjustment in the strict application of any provision of an ordinance may be granted unless there are special circumstances or conditions, fully described in the board's findings, which are peculiar to the land or building for which the adjustment is sought and do not apply generally to the land or buildings in the neighborhood, and have not resulted from any act of the applicant subsequent to the adoption of the ordinance. The option to pursue a variance to R2 for the aforementioned properties is not a likely solution, since the need for a variance is the result of the act of the applicant to utilize the existing church facility as a cognitive and behavioral health facility." Another change that we talked about is a conditional use permit. Local governments often have provisions within their zone regulations that provide a degree of flexibility in applying the zoning rules that have been adopted by the governing body. These provisions are commonly referred to as exceptions or special condition use permits. Such permits are designed to meet the problem that arises when certain uses, although generally compatible with the basic use classification of the particular zone, should not be located as a matter of right in every areas included within the zone because of hazards inherent in the use itself or special problems which its proposed location may present. Special use or conditional use permits afford local government the flexibility to allow and impose mitigation measures to address concerns or deny the use if the concerns cannot be resolved. Standards should govern permit approval, and ordinances ordinarily list the possible exceptional uses. Conditional use permits do not require a variance. The existing provisions of a zoning ordinance because the requested use should already be prescribed as part of the zoning regulations. Permits are granted to the landowner and not tied to the land. Only two zoning districts within Riverton Municipal Code specifically list conditional uses: Ag AG 1784.040 and AP 17.88.040. That said, the zoning district I2 17.72.030 prescribes special uses under 17.72.030 pursuant to Riverton Municipal Code, and special and conditional uses are permitted by the City Council upon recommendation of the Planning Commission and subject to the requirements as the City Council deems necessary to protect adjacent property owners, prevent objectionable or offensive conditions, and promote the health and safety and general welfare of the community. The R2 zoning district does not currently list or prescribe any conditional use or special uses under its zoning category. As such, a conditional use permit for the proposed cognitive and behavioral health facility cannot be granted without first amending Riverton Municipal Code to include healthcare facilities as a conditional use under R2 zoning restrictions. Said amendment would require public notice and public hearing. It would also need to go before the Planning Commission for review before being presented to the City Council on 3 readings. This process could take as long as 2 months to complete. Over the last 40 years, the city has granted 20 conditional use permits. Of those, 17 were allowed as permits per the zoning district provisions, either Ag, AP, or I2. 3 were granted outside the prescribed uses of their respective zoning districts and were done in accordance with Riverton Municipal Code 17.04.040. The last option, which wasn't mentioned in the last meeting, and we'll go into this, is a non-conforming use under Riverton Municipal Code 17.04.040. Stretch a little bit. All right. 174040 establishes the Board of Adjustments and defines its powers and jurisdiction when it comes to variances and conditional use. The ordinance specifically states, the board shall have the following powers: to hear and decide special exemptions to the terms of this section wherever it is provided in this chapter that the approval of the board is required, and to authorize upon appeal specific cases after public notice, including the requirements of section 1704.050C2, and hearing and subject to appropriate conditions and safeguards such variances from the terms of this chapter that will not be contrary to public interest, where owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this chapter will result in unnecessary hardship, so that the spirit of this chapter shall be observed and substantial justice done as follows. Grant in underdeveloped sections of the city temporary and conditional permits for not more than 3-year periods for structures and uses in contravention of the requirements of this chapter. Underdeveloped sections is an underlined section of that code, meaning there's emphasis put on the definition of underdeveloped. It may be possible for the Presbyterian Church or the potential buyer of the aforementioned lots to go before the Board of Adjustments to receive a permit authorizing the proposed use of a cognitive and behavioral health facility. Decisions of the Board of Adjustments require a simple majority of its 5 appointed members and may be appealed to the district court via Wyoming Statute 161609. With all of this information, it should be noted that the lenders associated and the proposed cognitive behavioral health facility have expressed apprehension over the alternative options of a zoning variance or conditional use permit. Working under 1704.050 with the Board of Adjustments also would fall in line with this. Since an exception to zoning regulations would be held by the applicant, lenders are cautious about the risk they would assume when financing necessary improvements to the existing church facility. The applicant and representative for the proposed zone continue to work with the community in order to answer questions and facilitate the discussion. To that end, I believe they met yesterday evening at Teeter Park to have a town hall style meeting in advance of tonight's reading of the second reading of the ordinance. At this time, with the information that we have there, I believe that the decision is on the council's table for how we proceed with this. I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Well, would this Administrative Services Director please read Ordinance 23010 by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. Proposed ordinance number 23-010, an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the city of Riverton, Wyoming, designating the rezone of Presbyterian Church Addition replats lots 2 and 3, city of Riverton, Fremont County, Wyoming, from residential district R2 to office and institutional district CO.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adopt Ordinance 23010 on second reading.
So moved. I'll second.
Councilman Bailey with the motion, Councilman Paranto with the second. Discussion. Invite anybody that's here and wanted to discuss in the audience. If you'd like, you're welcome to come up.
Don't be shy.
Or not. If you don't mind telling us your name when you come up, and thank you.
My name's Dave Case. I live on North Broadway Avenue. And I missed the public meeting on July 18th. I was out of town. But I talked to Sarah Hughes last night after the meeting. And one thing I asked her if they provided Christian counseling. And she said they were open to that. And so I would ask, I heard the word flexibility there. I would ask that if they did provide Christian counseling as an option, as a service, that maybe you would allow it to stay under R2, residential R2.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
And I'll add, I didn't tell her this, but I'm a preacher here in town, and I've taken counseling classes in Bible college, And I would volunteer to help them get started until they could afford to hire a Christian counselor. And I'm sure there's other ministers in town that would do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Goody, George is going to speak.
George Piplica with Home Source. We did have a meeting last night. It was a really nice meeting in the park. Out of that meeting, they asked me if there was a chance to look at the option to postpone a meeting again for a period of time till they had more time to resolve this residential zoning to CO zoning. I talked to Mr. Butterfield today, and he said that in his understanding that you can only postpone one time for a period of 2 weeks. The buyers are okay with that. They would be asking for you to pass the zoning tonight for the CO, taking it to a third reading. And at a point at the third reading, if we still haven't found any other solutions, they could live with a 2-week option probably to solve this. What we have found out, and I believe the buyers have no choice at that point, through Mr. Butterfield, myself, and working with Mr. Miller, is none of those options that we've researched so far fit a viable way for it to work for the buyers. The conditional use doesn't really fit without an extended period of time, and even then, it has a financing issue for the parties. No lender wants to lend a $600,000 remodel and then have a conditional use come up and it's pulled, and then we have a remodeled church building in a zoning that doesn't fit. That's the issue we have with that. Variances are limited times. Special uses don't fit under the variance codes. I do think there is some possibility to form a fifth CO or a fifth commercial district that might not have the words health facility in it or whatever. The time to do that is lengthy at best and deals with Riverton municipal codes and makes that difficult. I will compliment the neighbors and them in our meeting last night. I think it was very informative. I think they were very open. I think we were able to shed some light on the process and how it works. And I don't think it feels like they got so much run over with a surprise. Now they feel they've had their chance to voice their opinions. I compliment them on what they've done with that. Unfortunately, though, the buyers at this point would love an opportunity to see if there's 2 more weeks, but there's not a postponement. It's postponement in their future. There's not a 2-month gap in their future to keep working on it. They're at a point where they were already interviewing, already looking at expanding, already looking at doing things. At this point, they're forced to look at trying to find a place to lease. Those lease options turn into 1, 2, 3-year options. Totally tears apart their design to what they wanted to do in Riverton. So we've really come to a tough point for the neighbors to decide in voicing to you tonight or next 2 weeks from tonight whether or not they support that. I get the feeling that, and you could ask them tonight if you choose to, that are they in favor of the facility? They've been very welcoming once they understood it. I think you could get almost a hand raise tonight. The majority would say we support the facility. Their problem is with CO. But at this point, and I've done this for many years, I don't have a solution for that either, other than to hope that an empty building or a building that could be used in other uses down the road is just as detrimental if it's sitting there as maybe ever going CO. But they do have some concerns with CO that are valid for their benefit down the road.
George, do you see this building really being able to be sold under an art residential zoned? I mean, how long have we been discussing this?
So we talked about it last night, and the church has had it listed prior to us coming around for over 3 years, 3 consecutive years, through 2 different realtors. Then COVID came along and they kind of took it off the market because there was no interest, no showings. This whole thing started with this particular buyer needing a specific property that meets their criteria. And literally I couldn't find him one listed. So I drove around Riverton and happened to drive down Broadway and went, there's the building. It's hard to find an open gymnasium style an exercise room with height and things, and to be able to have clinical offices with it in the same facility. And this building is perfect for that. They worry, the neighbors worry about the growth and what could happen. I can't speak for what will happen. I can tell you that the remodel initially is about 60% of the building. So the building's oversized for what they need now. But it does allow them growth in the future for office space. So ever selling it as an R2, as I explained to the neighborhood last night a little bit, if I was hired as that realtor, yeah, my first call would be to every church. That's been exhausted for a period of 5 years, so not much chance. I would then be forced to look at other limited uses, libraries, the stuff that could fit into an R2, a school of some sort. I don't see any private school institution. Possibly I could get a daycare situation that would be far more traffic than, as I explained to them, you'd have to have 100, 150 kids to make that work in that facility to pay for that building. So that would be even more traffic to their concerns. And our third and final option would be just trying to find a major company or an entity to buy that building and go back at changing that use to whatever they're going to remodel it to at that point in time, which could happen again. Only if you say no to the church, my understanding through Mr. Miller, and I could be wrong, is they can't repetition. The church can't come back and say, hey, we found another buyer and they want CO, but you're going to like this buyer because it's that, once that door's been slammed on the church, that door's shut, I believe.
Is that accurate, Mr. Miller?
For a period of time, yes. I don't know exactly how that is, but it's once this exact petition has been denied, to bring it back would have to rerun it in a different manner.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
pertaining to that question, I've reached out to Rick Sollers. We're looking to find the verbiage that explicitly states if there is a delay or if someone can reapply. We weren't able to find that language prior to this meeting. Mr. Sollers felt that his memory was that it was a year period. Again, that verbiage could not be found. It's not in our ordinance. We're looking in state statutes. So what I would say is we're looking into that right now. We don't have the definitive answer.
Thank you. Councilman Larson?
Mr. Piplica, what is the 5-year projection on that facility if it went CO and if the remodeling went fine and the financing went through and all of that? What are they projecting?
I don't know that I don't have the projections. I do have that the contract that's in place has a closing that has been extended already once to the end of August. So the funding, the money, that is done. The inspections are done, evaluation.
We have no idea what a projection. Do we have somebody from the company here that?
Sarah's here tonight, and I can ask her to step up. The original plans was 10, 11 offices in the area, and that was it, with future office expansion.
With the part that is not being renovated?
Correct. That lengthy building lying to the east it's like 100 foot by 45 foot, and they're not needing that many offices.
But it's available if they did.
They could build into it very easily. It's one consecutive running. So it encompasses the church, if you will, where the pews are and the services are held. That is the physical therapy, the actual physical therapy part. And that's something they want to add to their report, is what they're telling me. And I'm speaking out of turn because I'm not them, I'm not vested in it. I'm just going off what I've been told. So.
Councilwoman Salisbury, did you have something?
I'll let Sarah answer first.
Well, I don't have much more information as far as what George has said, like exact numbers and exact projections, but I'd say that that's fairly accurate as far as, 10 or so office spaces, remodeling the bigger area to provide like recreational opportunities or opportunities for groups, things like that. So we could hold some bigger group areas and have some of those offerings for the community who are receiving services through Path Wellness. But as far as like numbers, there's opportunity for growth, and we would like to build a good infrastructure to provide good supports for the community. So I think it's promising for longevity, for sure.
I know this is a bit of a weird traffic question, but I have an office right next to Fremont Counseling. Not a lot of traffic comes in and out of Fremont Counseling. How many therapists, just estimate, doesn't have, I'm not holding you to anything. How many therapists would be there and how many, you know what I mean, appointments could you be running at the same time? I'm just talking about the,
Sure. Like
Big
presently,
picture.
right now, through our current office, we run 4 to 5 counselors any given day of the week. Our busiest days, we have 2 to 3 days a week where we run probably 4 or 5 counselors out of there. So, I mean, in theory, you could have like 5 clients at a time, depending on, you might, unless you're running family groups, so it could be 5 to, 20.
so.
If you're all running families, but it's really dependent upon what you're running. If you were running 10 independent sessions, you might have 10 clients, anywhere from 10 to more than that, depending on what kind of groups and stuff you're running. So would there be an increase in traffic? Maybe a little bit. Is it going to be more than what Broadway runs through there right now? I can't say, but it's not. It's going to increase it some, sure. But exponentially, I don't see that happening, but I've been wrong once or twice.
It's not a small Walmart.
No, it's not a small Walmart.
You're thinking, like, even if you had half an hour sessions, let's say, you're like, okay, 5 people coming and going every half an hour, which
Well, and-
generally speaking is not going to be all day either. You're
No.
not running back-to-back-to-back sessions.
Not typically. And you have cancellations in there, and typically our sessions run anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. So you're looking at about every hour from 8 to 5 days a week. And that was a question that we fielded last night. Well, once we sell, or once we obtain this property, could we extend our hours? Well, I mean, in theory, I suppose that you probably could, but is that our plan? No. We plan to run Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And that's kind of our projection. Is there going to be opportunities for groups that might run in the evenings occasionally? Sure. But it's not going to be something where it's all night, every night, all the
You're
time.
not currently doing that right now.
Not presently. We don't have the space to be able to provide that kind of service right now.
Thank you.
So my question was with the 40% that's not getting remodeled or used, there's no really limitations or there's no idea that what could be in that portion of it right now, the other
It's
40%?
planned
Because I
from
think most,
Meeting, it was planned for that to grow into future offices.
just for that, I mean, I think it's not so much that people are against the company or any of what you guys are doing, it's just the zoning on the unknown.
Yeah,
Like
that's,
if you guys leave or this, you decide to do whatever you want with this part, there's no accountability to go back and do it once it's done. I mean, if that's what it can be whatever it is under that zoning, and I think that's the biggest concern with the residents.
and
I-
that seems to be the consensus
Yeah,
that
we
we've
agree
gotten
with
from the
that.
neighborhood as well.
And I really think there's probably only really one. It's the healthcare words that make the neighbors more nervous. I don't think it's school, public, library, it's one word of one definition. And that really makes, and we don't have a future, so we don't want to mislead that for that.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I certainly would like to invite others who would like to speak to feel free to come on up. I guess I'm particularly interested to hear if the meeting last night made any difference from what we've heard the last meeting or kind of where we're at. So I would invite you, especially if you spoke last time, feel free to come back up and tell us if anything's different.
I'm back. My name is Teresa King. I live at 927 North Broadway, and I have attended all the meetings, including the one last night, which we appreciate that George came and spoke and Sarah spoke, and it was wonderful because a very congenial meeting. I think a lot of information was shared. We appreciate the work that Mr. Miller, Mr. Butterfield are trying to do to come up with some solutions. We're not giving up hope that there's a solution. I was asked by Mr. Paranto what we want. We want a win-win-win, and that's really challenging. We want the church to sell their building. The church has been struggling a long time to sell their building. They need to sell their building. We want, the general consensus is this organization that's coming in at face value sounds like it's a good organization, it's needed in our community, and there's really not an objection to mental health or a mental health facility. We don't want the zoning to change. And the reason we don't want the zoning to change is because the zoning language is extremely broad. It opens up the door to charities, nonprofits. I mean, it opens up the door to a lot of things, everything from a homeless shelter to inpatient care. And yes, they're building offices and they have available space. So what does that look like? What could that be? And the unknown is what concerns us. And I think it concerns the majority of the people. At face value, this group looks like they're going to be wonderful and a good fit. But we can't guarantee that that good fit is going to stay. And by changing the zoning, we are really opening the door up to a lot of changes that are not a good fit for our neighborhood. The language is extremely broad, and that concerns us. And when you read the uses, it kind of says there could be something there that we really don't want. And I think that's at the crux of this. We've seen the church struggle, and we all feel very bad about that, and we want the church to make a successful sale. But at what cost to us, for the rest of us who will live there and do live there and intend to stay there, because our houses are paid off and we do want to stay there. And so it's not about objecting to a mental health, as that's been kind of talked about a lot. That is not the case. It's the unknown and what this ordinance change opens up the door to. We also have concerns that it may open the door to more commercial development down the street, because North Broadway is not fully developed. And if we allow this in one, it's going to be really hard to say no again. And we could have more commercial structures all the way down the street. So that's our concern, how this is going to affect and change our neighborhood. And thank you. Thank you all. And thank you all for really careful consideration of this. And I think the silver lining is we've really come together as a neighborhood and talked about it and had some really good discussions. And we're counting on everyone to kind of come up with a solution so everybody wins. Gee, I'll wave my magic wand and make that happen, but it's up to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Mr.
Yes.
Bailey?
I guess you could try to answer it,
Okay,
since you got a magic wand.
I'll try. It might be broken.
I guess to me, it's sort of obvious that for the potential buyer to be able to finance this project, they probably need the zoning to be commercial.
We've heard some other information on that.
And I guess I'm just,
Yeah.
so the question becomes to me, is there a way for us to, and this might be for Mr. Miller, but it also would be for you. So what uses in CO, if you could take a marker and mark out, what would we mark out? And is that a possibility that we could change the zoning with some conditions that maybe restrict it a little tighter?
Right,
And I'm just throwing it out there
right.
to see if that's something that would work, because I think the last thing that we want, and I've said it before, is an empty building that
Absolutely.
already, talking to Ms. Weber, they've had issues with people trying to break in, and, unattended buildings are challenging at best, and so we don't want that to happen either. So I think everybody agrees that we want to find a good use for the building, so it's being there and it's occupied and it's somebody's mowing the grass and keeping it up and
Absolutely.
all of that kind of stuff.
Well, and the neighbors who live directly across from it have expressed that, and that's all valid for them. I mean, that's their direct neighbor, and we don't want it to go into disrepair. And these poor ladies at the church have been just hanging on and doing their best, and and we appreciate all that. So maybe that's a possible solution too. So maybe what we're asking tonight is, we haven't come to the end of maybe the what-ifs and the solutions, and maybe there could be some more consideration for what-if and solutions. And I guess that's our hope tonight, is that we aren't going to have to vote yay or nay, that there's still some avenues of discussion that we can come up with something that allows this institution to come in, but doesn't allow a homeless shelter to be there, or, things that, or an inpatient mental institution, because the word charity and nonprofit is very broad. And so I can start a charity, for homeless people, and I decide I'm going to put bunks in those offices, so that, and we couldn't stop that. We couldn't. I mean, under the CO, a charity can pretty much, and it's easy to be a charity these days.
We couldn't stop that at your house, though, either.
Well, but I live in R2, oh, that I'm a charity? Maybe I'm a charity case, but I don't know about that.
No, I'm just,
Yeah, raising my 5 kids, I felt like a charity. There you go. But I think that's a very viable option. And if input from some of the neighbors on specifically what concerns them about, you know, the what if, I think would be very valuable, and we would feel heard. So I appreciate your idea and see where it goes. And I guess that's what we're trying to do tonight. What are some ideas that we can get the win-win-win? Because we don't think that's impossible, but it will take time. And I understand that this organization is under some time constraints, but they're talking about remodeling a building. I went through a remodel that was supposed to take 4 months. It took almost 9 months. We know those processes are slow, and in the scheme of things, let's not rush this. So because we're afraid of a few extra months of delay versus a lifetime of all of us living there.
right.
So,
The opportunity for that company, if they don't see progress, is they go somewhere else.
I agree.
And then the church is back in a position where now they have to try to sell a building that we've already tried to zone it, it didn't go through. Now we've got a year at least. What are they gonna do? That's.
Well, and I
we
know
gotta
this
look at
is a
both
very
sides of that.
desirable building and they want to be there, and I get the impression, and then George can speak to it more than I can, that they're seeking a good solution as well. So a few months is different than a year.
Right.
And what does that look like? And, you know, even delaying the further discussion a couple weeks might help with the parties talking more about that. What's viable for them, what's viable for us. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. King.
Can I leave now? Thank
You can. We won't hold you hostage at the mic.
Council and Mayor, Kip Post, I live on Arapahoe, just off of Broadway, across the park from the church. And the only thing I wanted to speak to, I absolutely support the business itself. I think that's wonderful. I don't support the long-term zoning change for all the reasons that everybody's talked about. But I wanted to speak, I'm a lender, a commercial lender specifically. We have absolutely no issue with a variance in place. So our bank wouldn't loan on it as existing R2 unless that variance was in place. If that variance is put in place, I don't have an issue with it. So I think there's some creative financing that the company can look at, talk to some other lenders, talk to some other people that might not have the same restrictions that they have, because there are options. The conditional use permit, those are a little scary because they're a very short period of time. But a variance tied to the land, a local community lender, at least ours, I can't speak to the other lenders, but we're not going to have an issue with that. So just wanted to clear that up, make sure that that's not a stumbling block. Thanks.
Mr. Post.
Good evening. Carl Manning, live at 326 Moose, which is just across the park from the Presbyterian Church. Mr. Miller, what is it number 4 that has the cigar store in it? In the CO?
Oh, I don't have it I don't have the direction directly in front of me, but yeah, there's
Or it's F. It mentions barbershop. It mentions cigar shop. Cigar shops, they're not that often, but a vape place. That's a use that's similar to a cigar shop. Let's say a tattoo parlor. It could be put there also in this use because they're talking about cosmetology and beauty salons. Those are specific things that we wouldn't want because of the language. It opens it up to those kinds of possibilities. If you could take some of the words that you're hearing tonight about variance, you heard a creative finance idea. You say 8 weeks is a short time. That's 2 months. We heard about it, well into the process. We've been 4 weeks into it now as a neighborhood. That's a month. And we're still not, if you talk to the consensus of the people, we like the idea of the facility that's proposed. However, there are great concerns about CO. Even the proposed group, let's say they don't reach their financial goals and they have to look at some kind of other ways to help finance the building. They've got that section over there that could be turned into a rental office area. You don't have to put signage up. They just have to put a door so that the people can go down the hall and go to these other offices. So even under the condition for them, you can't, the crystal ball that, everything's going to be rosy in mental health funding, you never know about that. It's one of those things that businesses need to be viable by making money. This is a for-profit organization and run by people that want to make money. So it's a business, and business decisions, when it's a CO, opens up opportunities. That's just another thing that concerns me. If there's any questions for me, I'll be happy to try to answer. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
if you'd like for the record, I can read paragraph F.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So it states, office buildings for quasi-public, private, institutional, and professional services. A portion of the office building may be occupied and used as a drugstore, barbershop, cosmetologist shop, cigar stand, newsstand, or similar uses located entirely within the building with no entrance from the street or visible from any sidewalk, or have no sign or display visible from outside the building indicating the existence of such use.
So you could have a barber shop, but you can't have the cool barbershop pole outside.
I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah.
Got to have the barber pole.
So, Your Honor, the chance of anybody leasing a spot inside that building with no ability to advertise that they're there is pretty darn slim. But I guess my question still is valid, is could we limit that? Could we remove that paragraph specifically from this property? Could we make a variance in CO not allowing that for paragraph, for example? I don't know if that's possible.
Mr. Butterfield, are you wanting to address that? Go ahead.
Sure, and Mr. Miller, I apologize if you have something to say. Absolutely, I'd love to have his feedback. I would caution the council about removing paragraphs because what you could do is have an unintended consequence to an existing use somewhere else in the city that's relying on that. So for an example, if human healthcare facility was removed as a permitted use under CO, then you would have to find another zone for some of the other healthcare facilities in town. Example would range from the hospital to dentist office to other smaller medical facilities. So if you do remove something from this zone as a permitted use, you will likely have an unintended consequence on someone else's property, somewhere else in town. So as you do that, you need to consider how the blanket effect would be on the entire city.
Your Honor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm not saying change the zoning, I'm saying, and maybe a better term would be put a covenant on the property. Like there are certain areas of town that are residential, but then they say, okay, you can only paint your house these colors, right? Would that be a way?
It's got to be closed.
Or your garage got to be closed, or whatever, there's things like that. So could there be a covenant put on this property limiting the uses, because that is already being done in other zones, by covenant, which would be attached to the property more than the zone that it was created? And again, I'm just trying to think out of the box here.
I can respond to that, Your Honor and
Go
Counsel.
ahead, please.
Two things there. I think there's one thing to kind of springboard off of what Mr. Butterfield was talking about before. It is with extreme caution that we do talk about line iteming off of a whole zoning reference in general. And then to kind of reference the single use omission, so if we look at one zoning spot in particular and try to omit through zoning regulations some of the uses applied by zoning regulations, there's no precedence in that being allowed in the state of Wyoming under statute. So the zoning restrictions that you have set forth are the zoning restrictions in which you use. And to change those zoning restrictions, you need to either create another zoning restriction to work under the capacity in which you want it to, or change the zoning restriction itself as a whole. And what you're referring to on the covenant side, away from municipal code, covenants are private and civil in nature by the landowner, and attached to the property by the landowner on deed. So the city of Riverton does not have any jurisdiction over covenants or rulings over covenants. So if you live, for example, if you live in a development that has an HOA with covenants that state that your house must be built by brick construction, which is one that does exist in the city of Riverton and in locations, the city of Riverton, that does not pertain to me. You can submit for a permit any building that you wish to build there, but you do have a legal requirement by the covenant tied to your deed to follow that. So the individual landowner can set covenants. To answer, does the landowner have the ability to set a covenant on intended future use by zoning restriction? That's a pretty complicating row to hoe. I know that there are some zoning restrictions. I believe that you're well aware of some zoning restrictions that state that it needs to be maintained for residential use, or it needs to be for commercial use. I've seen that. That's the extent that I've seen that. That would be something that would be private in nature. The city would not have any jurisdiction to uphold or withstand, and I don't know the legal implications of that because it's not municipal in nature.
Just to clarify, you just said zoning restrictions, but you meant covenants when you said that just now, right?
Correct. I did mean to say covenants, yes.
Anything else? Anybody else want to speak? Come on up, Mr. Piplica.
Your Honor,
Yes, Councilwoman.
can we
Salisbury.
take a minute and let our officers have a chair? They've been working long hours and they're tired and standing in back.
Well, I'm going to tell you something that you may or may not know about our officers. They all wear duty belts. Our chairs are not friendly to duty belts.
I just,
So
they
some
look
of them-
exhausted and I hate to have them just
I agree.
standing back there, so.
They're a good-looking bunch back there. So I will tell you, for the most part, the ones that are not sitting are probably by choice. But I will say, there's a chair up here and there's a chair up here that don't have any sides. So if you want to come and sit up here and not have to squeeze in, there's two chairs up here and there's probably some back there that don't have them too. So,
So don't be bashful, come take a chair back. We'll take it.
The police vote.
I will say, if there's one thing that I could recommend for all future courthouses in the United States of America, it's that we would have wider chairs so that our officers aren't squeezing in. Yes? Do you think that could?
That would be good.
From the background.
Mr. Piplica, go ahead.
So covenants and that, without getting complicated, there is the possibility to do a deed restriction. That does happen. I know Mr. Bailey's experienced the power of a deed restriction before. When we first looked at this zoning and looked at it, when we looked at CO, it would become quite an interesting task to eliminate all the possibilities and all the things you would have to list in a deed restriction. And of course, that's limiting the church's future sale. Again, if something falls apart, it's also limiting the buyer's ability to do anything with the building other than pretty much you'd have to say just an office structure. But a deed restriction does transfer. It isn't something the city controls. It's like a covenant. And we have explored it a little bit. Again, that's our other idea that we haven't discussed with the homeowners is if we got a second pass, that would be the option of to go 2 more weeks to see if we can come up with a deed restriction that the homeowners would feel comfortable with, as well as the buyer and the seller. I'm not saying that's gonna be an easy task, but it does work, and it allows it to go through.
I guess the only issue is if at any point that restriction were be held invalid or challenged, then it gets into a bit of a quagmire there too, though, doesn't it?
Where deed restrictions get difficult down the road is if the person that designated the deed restriction is not around to enforce the deed restriction. So it does have some limits, you know,
Yeah, and I see what you're saying.
a
Usually-
Presbyterian church and a deed restriction should have an awful lot of length to it unless the whole church folds. Do you see what I mean? Because it won't be the local church, that would be the
Well, part of
diocese having to do that.
Part of the point with covenants is that you've got a plot of land and you sell this large plot of land. And so the idea is that everybody else that buys is subject to the same restrictions and they can enforce the deed restriction. If you're selling 3 lots or 2 lots, you're basically saying that the other person that can enforce it would be the other lot in terms of the covenant running with the land and going forward.
Yeah, generally in the deed restriction, the person that can enforce it is the one that granted it.
Or you could be really creative and have a reverter that would say if it's used for anything that's a purpose that's outside of what they agree to, then it would revert back to the Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure they'd be very excited about the prospect of that either, but.
No, and every deed restriction I've dealt with has always been a problem when it's 20 years or more. Everyone prior to that, it has stood up to its pretty strong document. But after time, it runs into difficulty. So
Well, we've had deed restrictions here when we sold the property to Brown Sugar.
Yep.
You were you were the one that suggested it.
Yeah, you've done deed.
I mean,
That was a
it's
reverter.
it's not unusual. I mean, it's not a zebra with 4 legs and 2 heads.
Right.
It happens.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, George. Anybody else? We're here at your leisure. Thank you for getting the chairs for the officers. You guys okay back there? Okay.
Curtis Henrich, I live at 417 Elk, which is directly across from the church. I don't know why I do this, but to me, we've got 2 options because we can't let this group not get this. Because if we do, nobody else is. And we end up with a vacant building sitting there that I would much rather take the chance on a CO than I would to have a vacant building sitting there. And I think that there are options that maybe down the road that we have to look at more or whatever. You know, whether you change the R2 just enough to let this slide in instead of changing the CO, but that takes time. These people, they can't start anything until this is done. They have the financing, they have everything. But they can't begin the renovation. They can't do any of that if the CO doesn't go through. So if there's nothing that you can do in the time limit that allows them to do that, as somebody that lives across from it, I don't know how anybody else feels about it or not, but I think we need to proceed with the CO if that's the only option that we have. And it scares me to death to think of what could happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road. But I would much rather live with that than to have that vacant building sitting there that I know is not going to sell, that nobody can do anything with, because it just isn't there. And so, however, whatever, if it comes down to accepting that CO as a landowner next to that, to me, that's the best thing to do. hopefully there's other options that will work into that. And hopefully path is there from now on, because we know that there's a need for it.
Councilman Larson?
So what you're really saying is it's better to have a green lawn cut than not. And it's better to have windows that are not broken and roofs that are not holes in them and a building deteriorating across from your house.
Yes. And I realize what may happen down the road. But every day when I climb into my car to drive to Pavilion to work at the school, there's 1,000 unknowns of what might happen. I might not come home because of a car accident or whatever. We live in a world of unknown. And it's sometimes we have to accept that and we have to go forward with it. That's the way I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. This is, you spoke last time and you spoke.
It was at the first one. I missed the last one. I was at a church function, so I couldn't make.
But you spoke against it then, and now you're saying.
No, I didn't vote. I didn't speak against it.
All right. I remember you getting up, but okay.
Right. No. I was very concerned about what a CO would bring. I'm still concerned about what a CO is going to bring. But in my mind of weighing all options and what we're running into and stuff, if we in a timely manner can't make this work by covenant, by rezoning, by whatever, then my opinion is to go forward with the CO so that the sale can go through and this business can go. And I'm willing to, and for me, I'm willing to accept what may happen 5, 7, 10 years down the road.
All right.
And have to deal with it then.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think as all of you know, I'm Jim Gores. I live at 505 Northridge, which is outside of the 140-foot notification area. But I can bring to you the experience of raising a family there. And that's, I think, what I would like to see protected. As the kids were growing up, we were a block and a half away from Teeter Park, and they wanted to go over and play in the playground. Go ahead and go. And Broadway wasn't all the way through at that point, but nonetheless, it was a real delightful neighborhood, plenty safe, and no apprehension on our part that something might happen to the kids between our front door and the park. And I think that is perhaps the epitome of what we would want as a residential neighborhood in our community, or certainly it seemed to be for me. And I don't think we're having to choose between two boxes, one that's so restricted we can't do anything except sell the property as it might be rezoned. And that box, once it's closed, from what I understand, is there forever. And that doesn't restrict what uses the former owners or future owners could perhaps do with the property. And we've also got the Pandora's box, which the CO ordinance might open up, which wouldn't lend itself to having the same neighborhood as my kids grew up in. I think that there has to be some middle ground someplace, and we as a community count on you folks to come up with that option. But anyway, from perspective that I can bring, it was one heck of a nice place to raise kids. I don't think any of you individually would say that's not what we're looking for in the community. How can you blend both of them together? I don't know, but I don't think we are faced with the choice of either an abandoned church with broken windows and a destroyed roof, which one council person was characterizing things as. But I don't think that we need to have the open up Pandora's box either, to where virtually anything, including a homeless shelter perhaps, would be welcomed into the neighborhood. So, as we're deliberating this, I think I'd like to see it kept in mind as to what you may well be giving up as well as what you might be achieving. And certainly the church and that property needs to move forward. It's proven to be inviable, at least financially in its current state, but we certainly don't have any assurance of the viability of a for-profit counseling service that comes in, and if they can't make it, and is the failure rate of that business equal to or greater than that of the church? I don't know. But in either event, at least personally speaking, I don't want to see the neighborhood change, at least in that sense. So thank you for your time. I think it's been a very civil discussion that's gone on here. I would hope that that would continue, and I think most of the community would as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Oh, or either of you, I'm sorry.
So Mr. Gore covered several things that I was going to cover. Janet Winslow, 203 Appaloosa. In these discussions, y'all don't have all the facts. When Kyle and me have put together a report for you, you have a whole lot more details than you get at these meetings. That church has had multiple offers from local establishments that would have fit the bill, and they have declined those offers. That said, we're in a time where we're inviting businesses to come here. We're inviting businesses that may fit the bill better than what this business does without changing the zoning. And we're inviting families to come here. So we need neighborhoods that meet the comfort level of families. And I would remind you, just as Mr. Gore just did, to take that into consideration when you're making this decision.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, because that fits right in line with what I'm going to say. My name's Randy Haig. I live right in the area, okay? We have a business out there that 9 out of 10 people that come in that shop that don't even live in the area are watching this. And their biggest concern is they ask me, okay, who owns the business that's halfway, that used to be the electrical company halfway up Main Street? Who owns Lincoln School? The old property there? Who owns 12th Street Medical? Okay, now they're worried the same thing's going to happen here is what happened to the Honor Farm property. That somebody's going to come in and buy it, then resell it. And then once it goes federal, then what's happened? That's the biggest question I keep getting asked every day, is what's going to happen if these people buy it and it doesn't work out, then the tribes own it. That's our biggest concern. Then what kind of control do we have if it's federal? You know, that's a whole different angle. You know, I hate to bring it up, but you see it happening all over town. And the biggest concern in the area is that might happen. We've seen it happen before. Some guy come out of state, bought it, and all of a sudden it's tribal. I know this is a whole different angle, but it's possible. You know, so, and I'm just bringing that up, but that's a different thing to think about. You know, so are they going to put boards on the windows like they do on these houses over here behind the rusty truck? And yeah, maybe, who knows? But I do believe that's an angle that needs to be addressed. You know? So, any questions? I mean, but I keep hearing it. Everybody's talking about it. They think it's going to happen again, just like what happened out there at the Honor Farm. And they're nervous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Haig.
Well, I'm Tanis Young Manning, and I live at 326 Moose, and Carl and I were talking. We've been there 27 years. I can't believe that. I want to thank you all so much for taking our calls and calling us back. And gosh, I feel very blessed. Through this whole process, I've come to, I can recognize, I didn't know who you were, and you represent me, Miss Borders. And we had that meeting last night at the park, and we have come together so much as a community over this, believe it or not. We really feel that you are listening to us. This is as difficult as this is. I think the best news I heard tonight was that Mr. Post gave us that his institution, or an institution like his, would finance this. I mean, that's been the big thing tonight. They can't get their financing if it's this, if it's that. I mean, I almost thought our problem was solved there. Did anybody else feel like that? I don't know. So that was some of the best news, knowing that there is available financing with stipulations. And those stipulations, it appeared, would please the neighborhood. Did you get that? Did you get that? Did you get that? Kind of, yeah, okay. Maybe I just see it how I want to see it, right? Ask my husband, that's what he says. But speaking of my husband, he did bring up some good points on that. That language can be so easily twisted and construed any way that you want it. And if they're not going to be using the whole building, I am concerned about what is left vacant. Now, you, Mr. Larson, you had a really great question tonight. You asked, basically, what is their 5-year plan? No, not are they going to be there 5 years, but what is their plan, their 5 years? What's their goal? I mean, most firms and institutions have a 5-year goal, what they want. So what do they want? What do they want for Riverton? And that language, it can be twisted, it can be interpreted any way. Mr. Manning said, could a cigar shop be a vape shop? I mean, more modern language. Cosmetology center, could that be a tattoo parlor or whatever is, popular today? Also, a lady asked me the other day, she said, what it was that frightened me about this issue. And what is it that your neighbors are so afraid of? And when I thought about that, we have not been fearful. We are cautious, and I see you being cautious also. We're not making decisions out of fear. We do not want this to be CO. Most of us don't want this to be CO. The bottom line is, Teresa's magic wand, somebody's crystal ball, we do not know what tomorrow's going to bring, and that was spoken to already. Something happens, electrical system goes out, they can't put out $500,000 to fix it, they go belly up. You know, this is what we've talked about, who is the next tenant? Who is the next tenant? It isn't these guys. Path, they're fabulous. I said before, I can't imagine anyone being adverse to this. That isn't it. And they have the best intentions of being here, but gosh, we've seen this over and over in Riverton. New a building, and it's been 1 million different businesses. We're very thoughtful. We're very thoughtful people. We think about today, but just like you, we're thinking about tomorrow. We have a broad scope of vision, and I see that with you guys. We're focused in the moment, but we're looking futuristically, just like you guys. Maybe things can't stay the way they always were. Miss Weber said at the planning meeting, change is coming. And certainly it is. You know, it just marches right over us, doesn't it? But we have control. We have control, and I know we can work this out. I know that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And we're counting on you. We're counting on you. I know you can, we have financial wizards in the room. We have real estate experts. We have legal eagles in the room. We can do this. I know we can. Maybe we can't find the language right now, but we will. Maybe the extension of 2 weeks is what we need, a little extra time. And I appreciate your thoughtfulness. But I know we can work this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I've received, Dean and Mike and I and everybody on this council has received a lot of phone calls. And I would be reticent if I didn't understand completely what you're thinking. The difference between the zoning change in my backyard on 16th East and Webwood it was a blank piece of land. And the developer was reticent in describing what he wanted to do. He would dance around it. He phoned in from Arizona, and he told us that on the second reading that if it didn't go his way, it wouldn't hurt them because they had other plans for the property. There's a big difference here in this CO versus the property in my backyard. And this is in my backyard. I own a house on Eastview. And, but this is a building. This is already complete. We already have a structure there. And that structure it's not going to go into something that we don't understand or can't view or look at. So there's a big advantage. And I know that we can do a limited, write on the deed what you can use it for. And I'm sorry for the Episcopal Church being required to sell and that their membership's gone down, and Presbyterian, that church. Because everything is changing. I mean, Look at the show houses, look at the way we spend our time, look at the dinner meal places. Everything is changing. When they put 16th East through, that infuriates me to no end, but it's there. And when they put Broadway through, I was happy as a lark coming off of Webwood going that way to my office. So one is difficult and one is good, but we're trying to do our very best. We don't want to stick it to anybody. We want everybody to be happy. And with the grace of God, maybe we can do it. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Your Honor, I have a question.
Go ahead.
You know, we've had a lot of discussion, and I really appreciate everybody calling and taking my calls when I return them. But there's also kind of a mouthful, as Mike indicated, and having to kind of roll up his sleeves and take a breath. Can we kind of clarify what the options are as they pertain to either keeping the zoning R2 with the variance and the possible ramifications thereof, and or limiting a CO with restrictions that may go into perpetuity or not, what that might look like, and then what a deed restriction might look like? Because right now, we have kind of a huge ball that I'm trying to deal with, and I'd like to get some clarifications on what those pros and cons might be. And maybe that's for our next meeting. I'm totally happy to provide an affirmative vote to move this forward to buy us a little bit of time. But I'd like to see something like that coming back so that we kind of can really deal with a choice as opposed to all these possible options.
Yes.
Is that possible?
Yeah, Your Honor, Counsel, I can answer some of that just right off the cusp.
Awesome.
No, I don't want an answer. I want option 1, option 2, option 3. Those are our choices. When we just ramble, we don't have an option. We have a bunch of spaghetti, which we had just discussed.
Yes, Your Honor, Counsel, I'll explain it. I'll explain it option by option.
Miller, thank you.
So the first option of a variance, is listed is it's the property in its current use by the opinion of those of us that reviewed it with Mr. Sollers as well, that a variance doesn't apply because of the intended use is not a formality upon the existing owner. On the conditional use permit, the conditional use status is not allowable because conditional use doesn't exist in Riverton Municipal Code currently. You would need to rewrite Riverton Municipal Code to add a conditional use in R2 for that type of establishment to exist. And the third is the option of using Riverton Municipal Code 17.04.040, the Board of Adjustments. The Board of Adjustments opinion is a special use under non-conforming use, and that is a viable option, but it does put a 3-year restriction on the conditional or on the non-conforming use to be reviewed in every 3-year period. And those are the 3 changes for it to maintain R2, and only one of those is viable, is the going to the Board of Adjustments with a 3-year conditional non-conforming use. And then the other option is changing the zoning to CO under the current CO zoning restriction. So there's two options that currently under the legal structure in Riverton Municipal Code that are viable for the use of this facility. One of them would be appearing before the Board of Adjustments for a 3-year conditional non-conforming use, and the second being approval for CO zoning restriction.
We do have conditional uses, though, just not for R2 that would include any of these uses. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor. We would need to rewrite Riverton Municipal Code to add conditional uses to R2 to then be conforming.
So I guess that is an option.
That is a tertiary third-degree option, yes, where we could rewrite Riverton Municipal Code to add conditional use.
And I guess what Mr. Bailey was alluding to is the idea of creating a whole new zoning classification. No, okay. I was when you were talking about if you could just cross out any of the uses here that you don't want it to have, I was like, are we talking about a whole new?
I was talking more about a deed restriction or a covenant or something like that, that was attached to the property, not trying to change CO for the whole town. I don't think that's a,
No,
that's a can of worms we don't want to dig into right now.
No, I guess what I was saying is theoretically, not that I'm saying it would be a good idea, you could create a CM or whatever it is that would be a completely new one, but that just feels a lot like spot zoning to me.
Yeah.
So,
And would be lengthy time frame wise to get
yeah.
through.
What kind of time are we talking about, to be clear?
You're talking.
To create a new zone?
It'd have to go before the planning commission, they'd have to look at it and decide. I mean, and the thing is it's not just here, it's a whole new classification that could be used anywhere in town.
Right.
And that, it's not something that I would think we'd want to jump into for sure. I think we'd be easily talking much more than 2 months for that.
Yeah, Your Honor, Counsel, just the time run to get through public notice, Planning Commission and City Council, 3 readings would be 2 months. The time to create that legal description in language, to study how that would be done, how it affects the zoning, how go through planning review of that, I would estimate the precursor to create a new zone would take about a 6-month period to do all the legal background studies and everything that needed to be done on that to be proper.
You're talking 8 months or so.
Yeah, I would say 6 to 8 months would be a minimum.
Yeah.
Okay, just asking the question. not-
Yeah, absolutely, it's a great question.
Yeah, we don't want to,
Yeah.
we're talking about options. Yeah, I appreciate that though.
And Your Honor, the option of changing CO or applying any kind of restrictions to a CO is not an option because of how that would affect the other COs in the city. It would be applicable to those COs as well.
Right, they had previously been a conforming use, and now they're a non-conforming use, and
Right.
something happens to that building, can't replace it.
And they try to refinance it or sell it or,
So a deed restriction is also an option.
Right, not one that we can enforce. But the point of a deed restriction, though, would be, we would be saying, we're going to approve the CO zone, and we're going to do it on faith that this deed restriction is going to be done and that it's going to be enforced. It takes control out of our hands in terms of enforcing it. Not that I'm saying that's necessarily bad or good, but
well, class action would really be fun. You would love that.
I'm glad you think so. I don't think. So, any other discussion?
Your Honor, what are if we were to kick this down the road for another 2 weeks, what are the possible options that we would be looking at in doing that?
I think tabling this wouldn't take away any options, for sure.
Would it buy us any time to look at any other options?
Can we only table it once?
Your Honor, you could table the matter, but you have to bring it up at your next meeting. So it buys you the period from this meeting to the next meeting.
And then possibly the following 2 weeks for the next reading,
Can
for
we
the final
ask
reading.
George what his timeline is?
We could do that.
George?
Mr. Iplica, can you make any comments about timeline and any issues with 2-week table?
George Piplica. No, I mean, I did mention earlier that if it was a 2-week scenario, what they were asking for was you to take it through the second reading tonight, and then if you get to the third reading and we're on a specific detail, we narrowed down, this is an option we can look at, and you postpone that hearing. I did explain to the homeowners a little danger of always going to a third reading and then having a vote happen, and all of a sudden they don't have it, so I want that clear, but the buyer is definitely looking for, you are exhausting every option for them as well. They're looking at their own options, but aren't having a lot of luck. The variance issue, I appreciate Mr. Post and that option there, and I'll certainly give them his name. But it wasn't the funding on a variance, it was the funding on the special use or conditional use permit. The variance was one that the city just didn't feel like was gonna work. So there may be some confusion in that, but, so we would ask that you move forward with a second vote, but with the intention that we continue to study deed restriction. I would have to get my own attorney involved and get the church involved and get their attorney involved and really look at what we could limit, and then also get the homeowners to agree that that is inclusive enough to make them feel comfortable. That might take 4 weeks. Do you understand? But at least if that's where we're at, the buyer could agree that maybe they don't want the property because it's so restrictive that they would worry about their own resale. But I guess that would be their decision. Not, at least we've tried.
Mr. Bailey, did you want to?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Miller, quick question. Thank you, Mr. Piplicka. Theoretically, conditional use, that have to go before the planning commission, then 3 votes for the city council, correct?
Correct, yes. The only option that doesn't go through a full rerun, the only 2 options that don't go through a full rerun are continuing on the CO path or denying the rezone and sending it to the Board of Adjustments.
With other conditional uses that we have, if I'm not mistaken, and tell me if I'm wrong, that goes to the planning commission and then comes 1 vote before the city council, is that correct? Or is the planning commission just able to approve it?
The conditional use under an existing rezone, it would come to planning commission, and then I believe it comes as a consent agenda item to council as a 1 read.
I'm thinking of like daycare facilities, for example.
Correct.
Have daycare facility as a conditional use in residential areas, advertised, planning commission considers it, city council considers it.
Yeah, the daycares are certain types of daycares are licensed differently, and some of them are not considered conditional uses. Some of them are considered just regular standard uses in a residential zone, but they require licensing and follow-through. So those do not come to council. Those go directly to planning commission, get voted on at planning commission, and then roll through because they are an existing zoning restriction that does exist on the code. But when we do have conditional use, the council does get the final say on that in a 1-read consent agenda. So it would need to exist for that process to be able to be ran, though, yeah.
And that's what I was asking. In a conditional use, you're talking 2 months, but we're talking easily more than 2 months. Because you've got to get between the planning commission, between 3 readings of the ordinance, between whatever we're saying is the requirement, which may include going back to the planning commission and then coming back to the council. I mean, if you're really rocketing along, you could maybe do 2 months, but I mean, we're talking you'd start now, and it'd be tight.
Correct, yes, and that, the verbiage of the language for conditional use is very critical, and understanding the gate that any individual conditional use opens is very critical, that we understand that as well. So it's that, the legal ramifications of making sure that's correct are very well understood.
The point with that would be if we did a conditional use for an R2 zone, it's a conditional use that's possible for every R2 zone now in the city.
Absolutely
Then
correct.
every R2 zone has the possibility of this as a conditional use, subject to whatever restrictions are provided. So, for example, there might be somebody who wants to open a healthcare facility down on 16th Street. And then they say, okay, we want to apply for a conditional use. Everybody's notified, which is what we might normally do for other conditional uses.
Absolutely.
Goes to the planning commission considers it, they make a recommendation, comes to the city council. It opens that, I mean, we're talking about Pandora's box. That's another, it's kind of the same as saying we're going to change every single CO.
Yeah.
Correct. It absolutely does open that. That is the importance of the language of conditional use being very mildly used.
Okay. Haven't been meaning to hog the discussion. I just wanted to.
No, thank you for, it's clarifying.
Your Honor, and then the conditional use only lasts for 3 years, or is that, is that something different?
No, the non-conforming Board of Adjustments conditional use is a 3-year period to be used to help develop undeveloped areas.
Right, which I can't believe the financial institution they wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
3-year. I see shaking heads from Mr. Post.
Yeah.
Or shaking head, I mean.
Shaking yes or no?
No. there's a difference between a variance and a non-conforming use, because the non-conforming use is limited in time, whereas the variance runs with the land.
Absolutely, yes, correct.
But we don't have the possibility of a variance. We currently don't have a conditional use. The 3-year restriction on non-conforming use isn't a possibility. We could try to do some things. I mean, I appreciate that there's a lot of people in the audience that think we're miracle workers. I appreciate the faith, but it's a tough one.
Absolutely, this is one of the more challenging legal wormholes I've been involved in, for sure, just to try to find a solution.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? Councilwoman Salisbury?
Ask them if there's anybody else comments.
Well, anybody else want to comment? This is second reading. I'm not trying to push that too much, but just to be aware, we still have one more meeting. And I don't mind if everybody gets up and says the same things at the next meeting. And we're here for you, so.
Your Honor, I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
have a question. So we pass it through tonight to continue. So could we possibly table it at the third reading? So
Yes.
that would buy us 2 weeks, but that's the
That's an idea.
most,
Yeah.
that's the most we're gonna get.
Yeah.
So we could
Once-
possibly have 4 weeks total from now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've tabled something, if you don't take it from the table to the next meeting, it dies.
Mm-hmm.
If you do take it from the table, you have to consider it and can't, I don't think you can retable, can you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's what was this
One
discussion.
time.
Okay,
So I think, yeah, I think we should move forward so that we can exhaust every option that we possibly can and try to come up with a good solution.
Call for the vote.
we ready to vote then? All right.
Do we have a motion?
We did have a motion. You made the motion.
You made it, I seconded it.
I know it was, I know it
Short-term
feels like
memory
a
is the
long
first
time
thing to
ago.
Second thing to go, I don't
Second
remember the
thing to
first.
go.
I think the important thing for everybody that's here to realize is we still have one more reading. I'm not trying to push that too much, but everything here, you're being heard. And I don't know how we're going to end up doing things, but you're being heard and you can be heard again, okay? So
Should be.
thank you very much for being here. And once we get done with this vote, I'll probably do what I did last time, which is we'll take a brief recess, so if people want to leave, they can leave, and they're not feeling like they're disturbing things too much, okay? All right. Thank you for talking.
And the rest of the meeting will be equally exciting.
These meetings, there's no shortage of excitement. We're here every month, twice a month, at least. Okay. All in favor of passage of ordinance 23010 on second reading, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right. I vote aye. Motion passes. We will have a 5-minute, well, we'll do an 8-minute recess. Come back at 8:50. All right, I declare we're back in order at 8:52. Next item on the agenda, bid award for a hook truck, giving Mr. Miller a slight break today.
Much
Mr.
appreciated, Connor.
Eggleston.
Your Honor, if you don't mind, I'll defer to Operations Division Manager Dan Adcock.
Dan, thank you for sticking around and being here.
Welcome. Your Honor, members of the council, I do have a bid award recommendation tonight for one new hook truck. During the preparation and adoption of the 2023-2024 budget, the Riverton City Council has authorized the purchase of one new hook truck at the request of the Public Works Department. The Riverton City Council budgeted $286,900 for this total project. This includes procurement of the vehicle and the purchase and installation of all the other required equipment. Wyoming State statute provides that a vehicle of this type must be competitively bid. The bid was advertised beginning on July 8th of this year and was closed on July 21st. On that same day of July 21st, we opened the bids. We received one bid for this vehicle, when that bid is being responsive. The bid we received was from Peterbilt of Wyoming for the one new roll-off truck for the amount of $244,194. So staff proposes that the City of Riverton award the bid to Peterbilt of Wyoming in the amount of $244,194 for a savings of $42,706 off what was budgeted for this item.
All right, thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the purchase of one new roll-off truck in the amount of $244,194 from Peterbilt of Wyoming.
So moved.
Second.
Councilman Bailey with the motion, second by, was that you?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Paranto? Okay. Any discussion? It sure is nice when things come in under. We've had a couple that have been over. It's nice. But it was responsive and everything, I think you had indicated, so we're good. Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Bid award water meter project. Public Works Director report this time.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. Before you tonight is a request for a bid award related to our ARPA automated water meter project and lead copper rule compliance project. Our request would be to approve a bid to Viper Underground in the amount of $3,548,900. Should be noted that in 2022, the city approached ARPA or the SLIB and received a grant for this project, or a grant award for $2,982,000. The city's match for that is $568,000, and that's the city's match is split between the city or the sewer and water enterprise funds. We went to bid on this project on earlier this year, and the bid opening was held on July 11th after a 3-week advertisement plus a 2-week extension. We received one bid for the project. It came in the amount of $7,764,250, which is significantly over budget. With only having one bidder, we had the ability to enter into negotiations with the lone bidder, and we're fairly successful at that. Through some value engineering, we were able to eliminate some meters, some 1-inch meters, 1-inch appurtenances, and some other miscellaneous items in the category to still make the project move forward. We have $3,550,000 available and budgeted for this project. If we approve it at the negotiated price of $3,548,900, we can proceed with that project right away. If it's approved and we place the order, the meters and everything are still approximately 40 weeks out. So We still have quite a long lead time. The federal money's got to be encumbered by 2024 and completely spent by 2026. Once we have the meters in our hand and the contractor can start work, we estimate 200 days for installation on that set of meters. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Go ahead.
So out of the, again, I'm just guesstimating 4,200 meters. If I remember right, that's about how many, city residences we have. How many are we cutting back and not buying as many meters? Or, how did you get $3 million knocked off this bid, I guess?
We eliminated a total of 538 meters.
Okay.
We also eliminated everything associated with 1-inch installations. We also eliminated the vast majority of the dual check valves and expansion tanks. We eliminated meter loops. Not completely, but we left a few in there for the unknowns. And we were able to do some value engineering and recommend purchasing a Chevrolet instead of a Cadillac, basically, so we can still move the project forward. In the future, next budget cycle, we'll look at starting to integrate some of those meters we had to cut out this time. But we can still make it work.
So we could expect a second phase of this possibly?
Probably not a second phase of this funding, because this funding will go away, but.
Of the project?
Correct.
Total meter replacement?
Correct.
Okay.
And those 548 people don't have to pay for their water anymore, is that how?
No, they still have to pay for it. We'll just have to manually read those.
That probably wasn't a very good joke.
Well, mine have been at 8 o'clock this morning.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve the award Viper Underground amount of $3,548,900 for the automated metering project.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Larson with the motion, Councilman Bailey with the second. Other discussion, questions, amendments?
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
So we're doing primarily 3/4-inch meters.
That's correct.
That's the residence. That's not commercial. That's,
Huge volume of them, yeah.
yeah, that's where the money, that's where the water flows, essentially.
So this is going to be 3,030 3/4-inch meters, is that right?
That's correct.
I mean, my office, that's all it's got, is 3/4-inch. Now, Mike, you've got, what, 1.5 or 2 inches or 5 inches for your wonderful water fire hydrant detection.
Any,
indoor golf range.
any thoughts as to why we are so off?
A lot of it, based on our conversations with the contractor, came from the installation of the meters themselves and a lot of unknowns from his subcontractor. They weren't sure what they were going to get into, so they, right off the bat, bid them very high.
Okay.
Not just the meters, but the installation and everything. With the dual check valves and expansion tanks, those have to be installed by a plumber. Just the meters themselves, if all we're doing is maintenance and replacing meters, the contractor, the general contractor can do that with his own personnel.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your hard work on this.
It wasn't me.
This has been a little bit of time in coming. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Phytoremediation agreement. It's one of my favorite words, by the way. It's a fun one to say. Public Works Director, please.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. Before you tonight is a request to enter into a contract or a proposal with Inberg Miller Engineer for $22,700. This is related to the phytoremediation project. As you recall, we entered into a 2-year contract and subsequently extended that an additional year. And it concluded in 2022. We received a report from the engineers in March of '23 indicating that based on what they've seen and some corrective action they would take, that phytoremediation was a feasible corrective action for the old landfill. Based on that information and going into a budget cycle, we went ahead and budgeted $22,700 in addition to the money it would cost to enter into the landfill remediation program. So we had a total budget line item for, I don't see the total budget, $650,000, I believe, right in that neighborhood. Yeah, $650,000 was budgeted. $22,700 of that is for maintenance through this summer to preserve what's already in place. DEQ, the conversations that I have had with them, they're not real excited about the results of the phytoremediation pilot program. They're somewhat resistant, but they haven't made a final ruling on it. So in order to preserve what we'd already had in place, we've been maintaining it this summer with the assistance of Inberg Miller engineers and city staff, taking over some of the responsibilities as far as weed trimming and maintenance down there just to save on some of the expenses. But I guess we just request approval on this so we can finish out the summer. I expect we'll hear from DEQ later this fall or winter sometime if they're gonna even recommend this program for the LRP. If they don't, at least we preserve what we had.
Okay. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the proposal for engineering services from IME for $22,700, I guess, through the end of 2023. Is that what we're looking at?
That's correct.
So moved.
Second.
Councilman Larson with the motion, second by Councilwoman Salisbury. Any discussion, amendments?
Oh, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The alternative that they came up with was dig it up. And 2 shovelfuls would be $22,700. And then it'd be the landfill and Lander, and then when it extended, it'd be out to Sandral. And they found out that the contaminants are in tight sands. They're not moving. This is an appropriate way. And the DEQ is, well, I don't know what we want to define that, but this is a good deal.
I would think so. And we want to hold out, I guess, hope that this is something that the DEQ could be persuaded.
Well, and I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think there was some mechanical failures with the pilot program that certainly didn't lead any credence to DEQ to be really receptive to it, but they still haven't completely blown it off either, so.
We had some acts of God, or more appropriately, acts of
cattle.
Too.
That's correct.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Half-cent funding recommendations. Just because we want to have everybody have a chance to talk today, Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Except the chief, I guess.
Would you like to give my report? No. The EDGE Committee is charged with reviewing and evaluating economic development applications for funding using the 0.5% tax as approved by the voters and making funding recommendations to the City Council. The committee opened up the second round of funding applications this year, which ran from June 1st to June 30th, 2023. During this period, the staff received applications from 6 entities totaling $931,248. The committee heard their presentations on July 13th and met the following week and made funding recommendations. Included in your report is a spreadsheet providing the applicant information, project descriptions, funding requests, project totals, and recommended funding. The applications are included in their entirety. The committee recommends the following 4 entities for EDGE funding. Brunton International, recommended at $76,286. Legacy Foam Solutions, recommended at $90,000. Media Adventure Queen for $3,464, and Riverton Youth Soccer for $125,000. The staff has not conducted work towards verification of the submitted applications or claims made by the applicants or feasibility of the proposed projects. Additional information will be requested at the direction of the council. Funding will be allocated from the 0.5% economic development tax funding as it becomes available, depending on the specifics of the individual agreements. The current available balance of monies available for distribution is $229,750.36. The committee is recommending encumbrance of approximately $65,000 of future funding, and our 12-month trends currently reflect an average of $69,000 coming in per month. The committee will open up another application period from September 1st through September 30th of this year. And I wanted to mention that we have several members of the EDGE committee in the audience, as well as applicants, some of the applicants. And it is with that the City Council directs staff to prepare funding agreements for approval based on the recommendations of the EDGE committee.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'd entertain a motion to direct staff to prepare funding agreements for approval based on the recommendations of the EDGE committee. Or any other kind of motion, honestly. You could make any motion for how we want to fund things. You are just a talkative bunch tonight.
Your Honor, could we table this?
We can. No reason we can't. We don't, I guess, really even have to table it. We don't even have a motion. We could just say, hey, city staff, could we put this on the next agenda? Do you want to say, hey, city staff, do you want to put this on the next agenda? I mean, there's nothing that says we have to fund this immediately, is there? I know that some of the organizations were wanting funding. I guess, tell me about time constraints, Ms. Harris or Mr. Butterfield.
Your Honor, some of the applications are time sensitive for the funds that they're needing to implement into their business or their project. And so as you review some of those applications, I think you'll see that where they are hoping to receive funds. I know one, for example, has a contract in place or a pending contract in place, and these funds would help them secure or fulfill that contract. So whether or not a 2-week period would be detrimental, I couldn't say, but I do know that some of these are time sensitive because these entities do have the intention of putting this money to use in the community as soon as possible and with their businesses.
I know we have people here from Legacy Foam. Brunton, do we have anybody here from Brunton? You're welcome to chime in if there's any sort of time constraints that you're under. The question was, can we talk about this at the next meeting?
My question is, I would like to know a little detail of what Brunton, Legacy, Riverton Soccer Youth have planned for the money.
Well, if you look at the...
They have the packets.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'd like some verbiage from them standing there in front of us.
Sure.
Hello, Mayor Kosarog, Chairman Committee. I just wanted to get up here and answer some questions because I would recommend that the contract signing, because Mia and the staff do such a great job, that the time constraint could very well be a factor because I believe we just finished the last contract, if maybe we haven't yet, from the last. So I don't want it to carry towards September. So 2 weeks, any questions, I definitely want to answer.
Well, how about you tell us a little bit, question in particular was, tell me what you know about what Brunton is planning.
So Brunton is a compass. They make it for the military. It is right now not illuminated. It's been asked to be illuminated for a long time. Finally, they have the correct owners that are willing to put capital investment into it, and the technology is available to make it feasible. They want to move forward with that. They also, so it is a government contract, and I do believe that that's what makes it time sensitive. Anything else on that one? That's a quick overview, but
Well, yeah.
that is the gist of it. Now, the funding numbers do come from specific parts of that. They are broken down in there. There's different moldings, things like that, as far as it wasn't the entire funding of the project. In fact, I do believe it was below the minimum of what they wanted to take the project forward. But it was the specific items that they needed to at least go forward with the prototypes, I believe. And Kevin, I'm sure, could jump in to agree with that. I don't want to speak on Brunton's behalf, but it was to keep the project moving forward so they could get prototypes and go to bid, I believe.
There were things I think we'd been talking about, molds, tooling, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Mr. Krashishnik, do you want to tell us about this? You tend to know everything about all of these,
I
so.
can say everything, but Your Honor, members of the council, Kevin Kershishnik, IDINC. So Brunton, on the advisory committee for Brunton as well, that's exactly what the chairman was saying, is they're looking at developing a new product for military contracts. It's their M2. It's a transit that basically is used for the military purposes. They have a contract coming up. They're starting the tooling process right now. So there's an injection mold tool that they need to do. The advantage of this particular project is that they are using legacy molding in town to do the mold. So those monies are going to be used for local manufacturers to produce that product for them. They're also using Pertec for some of the electronics on their devices. So they're vertically integrating in the area, which is helping all the local manufacturers. It's a great opportunity to assist them in their business going forward.
And this is partial funding, but your understanding is even with the partial funding, this is something that will come in handy.
That is correct, Your Honor. I talked to CEO Lauren Hershamp, and she was saying that, yeah, that they would appreciate any funding that could be provided for their company to move this project forward. They're seeking alternative funding as well, including equity and internal funding.
I know some of the discussion during the EDGE meeting was about, well, wait a minute, shouldn't you be able to have money to be able to invest in your own company? Some of the discussion was, we have some equipment that's been around for a while that hasn't been maintained maybe like it could have, and we're trying to deal with that, if I recall correctly.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor. And when they purchased the company, it's similar to other acquisitions that have occurred in the area for manufacturers. What happens is, as the company goes forward, they just milk the proverbial cow, right? So they're taking their product, they're using that, trying to maximize their sales. They don't invest in future products. Then when they go to sell it, the next owner has to invest a fair amount of capital to keep the business going. Now, the advantage of Brunton is they've increased employment from about 21, 22 people up to almost 30. And they would have another 3 with this project if it goes forward.
Right, and this expansion, if this is something, and we would only be encumbering this assuming that it is something that they're going to get the contract, if I'm understanding correctly as well.
Correct. Yep, they need to provide a functional prototype to the military in order to be approved for that application. But it's just the next gen of their existing M2.
Okay.
Can we speak to legacy foam?
Legacy foaming, sure. You want to tell us about legacy foaming?
You're
We
right.
happen to have somebody from legacy foaming.
Well, I'd like.
If I may, I also wanted to point out that Brunton's request, their total project request was $226,821. The committee took a lot of care and consideration into making the recommendations at whatever small amount that we could provide, with them asking $76,000 out of the $200,000. So I just wanted to put that out there also.
Thank you. My name is Reg Larson with Legacy Foam. We've been a startup company. We started up during COVID and have had our challenges to get into this business. But since we've got going, we've been up and running and operating. We have 4 full-time employees. And the urgency for us, I mean, we were humbled by the opportunity to present this. My business partner and I are lifelong Riverton, Wyoming, and Fremont County residents, and we've just went out and been part of the business world. And so we saw the opportunity to come in and see if we could get a shot in the arm and some growth for our company, add some economic development to the bottom line of our community, and presented to do so. The urgency for us is this: it's about 4 to 6 weeks to build this foam unit, which we've been awarded by their recommendation. And when I put the unit together, it comes up to about $19,020 additional than what we've been awarded. And so I called the president of this company. They do $40 to $50 million a year in our industry yesterday, and was trying to kind of do some logistical things. We have a possible opportunity with YDOT, and part of our approach to the committee was things like the sinkhole on Main Street in Riverton across from the post office. We put in a proposal to do that, and admittedly only had the equipment to do so. But what we weren't able to convey in our proposal was we're backed by the expertise of Profoam's office out in Rutledge, Georgia. They do this stuff across the country. Again, they're a $40–50 million entity in our industry. And when we bought our trailer, their backing gave me confidence to step into an industry that I had never been involved in. With the YDOT opportunity, I thought, if this committee is gracious enough to award us some money, how could we give back? How could we help? And Main Street came to mind right here in our hometown. And so we had agreed, and I just came up with a theory to possibly discount our proposal. Just if I put a little skin in the game, obviously the committee's helping us with the shot in the arm, maybe some others could. In that, Cody and I had spoken. He put me in touch with Robert Scheidemantel with their group. And there is a plethora of more opportunities right now for Legacy Foam. We're developing a meeting for that and may end up down in Cheyenne presenting with this unit and what it can do for YDOT. Bridge support, lifting, anything they tear up, we can put foam in and stabilize those kinds of things. So back to the start of this, it's timely for us because if I can convince Profoam to take my 20 grand down on the come of this money, I can get the unit ordered within the coming appropriate time, near term. And this is all seasonal work. So I think that's what's important for us as Legacy Foam. That being said, we're humbled by the possibility of this award, and whatever time it takes, we can make, do. But we've put some skin in the game by coming up with, building a sister trailer and not settling for just the money that was awarded. We thought that was very important that our company stepped up as well, and it's the right tool that we need with the right capabilities. So, again, we're very appreciative of this opportunity, and anything else I can answer, I'm happy to do so.
Have any questions?
No. It just cements my vote, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
So, Your Honor, I'm going to make a motion to approve the EDGE funding proposal.
So that would be Brunton, 76,286, 90,000 for Legacy Foam Solutions, Media Adventure Queen, 3,464, and Riverton Youth Soccer, 125,000. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah.
Motion by Councilwoman Salisbury, second by Councilman Bailey. Any other discussion?
We'd like to hear what soccer's going to do with it, too. Since he's been sitting here all night.
My name's Josh Saltzgaver. I'm with the Riverton Youth Soccer Association. Our plan is to really expand our soccer offering, and in doing that, it would be purchasing the land next to Willow Creek. If you're familiar with Willow Creek Elementary School, we would be buying, I believe it is 12 acres right next to the community home Oxygen. I think everybody familiar with the chunk of land there. It's currently owned by Guard Enterprises. Our plan is to put in soccer fields there, eventually a indoor facility, and potentially partner with the Riverton Hockey Association, and when they go to build a new indoor hockey facility, we would more or less welcome them to that property because it's more suited for what they're trying to do there. And this would help facilitate our tournaments. Currently, in the past 20 to 25 years, we have kind of leaned on all the people in the community, meaning we would pretty much rely on CWC to let us use their fields. Since they've introduced a college program, we don't have that luxury anymore. We actually can't use their fields, period, now in the fall because they have a college team that's on it all the time. The high school fields are sometimes usable. It's all, dependent on what their schedule is. So this would be a full-time soccer field down there that we would utilize, as well as the school district. The school district introduced middle school soccer. They currently don't have fields for the middle school program. They essentially kind of just go where they can. I know at one point they were considering practicing in JC Park, I think, and they ended up just finding grass wherever they could. But our plan for those fields, once we install those, would have scoreboards on them as well, which is a requirement to host a regional soccer tournament. And if you have been around when we host a soccer tournament, it brings a lot of money into the community. So that's kind of our plan is, this is phase one of something so much bigger than just youth soccer. It's a partnership with the city to have a really nice facility that will host big events and hopefully help hockey as well as any other entity sports related that we're just trying to be that driving force to get it off the ground.
Can you tell me about the water pressure there? That had been some discussion at Edge.
Yes, Kyle and I have had some discussions on that, and last discussion that I'm aware of was the water pressures were significant and good enough for that area. Is that correct?
Your Honor, I think this goes to the question of what's the long-term proposal for this, and I believe it's the intention of the Soccer Association to have the city take over this land and maintain it.
Correct.
Public Works team has looked into the impact on our operations. The good news is from our Parks and Operations team to maintain the surface of the field, we can do that without too much impact. We think at most it would be a seasonal position that would help provide the weed maintenance, the mowing, and the other surface maintenance. When it comes to the water supply and the water model, I don't think we have enough information yet to speak confidently about the ability to water the proposed area. Part of the reason for that is the West Reservoir, which is located on Main Street and Hill Street, provides a lot of the pressure and supply for the lower zone. Currently, in the summer months, when Ryan Park is being watered, it does have a significant draw on that reservoir. And so to be able to water a similar type of ground or acreage may have an adverse impact on that, and that is something our water team is still looking into. We are performing the Water Master Plan currently, and this is something that could analyze the projected use, whether or not we have the supply and whether or not we can maintain the pressure for the lower zone and for the fields. So I would say that's still something that we have not yet had a firm answer on, and it is a concern. There is the Big Bend irrigation ditch that runs alongside Ryan Park and does run near this property. Unfortunately, that source of water doesn't serve very well for irrigation. Years ago, we used to use that as a source for Ryan Park, and we stopped because the silt level is so high that we'd burn up pumps and it wasn't sustainable. And I'd have Brian add any comment on that as his team has been the one looking into this.
Thanks, Kyle. Your Honor, members of the council, Brendan Tolman and I met briefly this afternoon to discuss our water usage. Currently, without any additional resources drawing on our system, in the wintertime, we produce about 30 million gallons a month. Summertime, it jumps up to about 100 million gallons a month. Right now, the system is about maxed out. We're diverting water, obviously, out of the canals from through RVID and LeClaire to help fuel the water plant. We're also running wells to supplant the usage in the city. So any additional draw, not to mention that West Reservoir's the smallest reservoir we have in the city. It's around 500,000 gallons. It's an impact. It's certainly a big impact.
That had been some of the discussion with Edge, as I recall, was wanted to fund this, but didn't want to jump into funding it unless we felt comfortable that we're going to have green grass and not brown grass.
Or no grass.
Or no grass.
Yeah.
So I guess at this point, do you have thoughts about how long we would take to be able to have a better idea? I mean, the water master plan, that's not like that's going to be done next week.
No, we're probably looking at after the first of the year before we have any good, solid, definitive overall results for the entire system.
I know some discussion had been perhaps a conditional kind of award where it would be like the award would be conditioned on if we can get water there. I mean, I think the idea, at least that Edge discussed, was we didn't want to be funding the purchase of property that's not going to be going towards what we're wanting it to go towards, which would be a soccer field. And if we don't have water.
Yep.
So, Your Honor, if I may, I think it's important to state that we as staff would love for this project to happen. We see recreation as a positive, and we appreciate all that the soccer group is doing. The best that we can offer right now is it is an unknown as to whether or not we would be able to adequately water the proposed field. There are some things that our team is looking at as options. I mentioned that the West Main Reservoir feeds a lot of the lower zone. This will get a little technical, but I'll keep it high level. There may be a way to change our distribution system so that the lower zone is more supported by the Main Street booster station and reservoir rather than the West Reservoir, but that changes our distribution system. We'd have to see any impacts as we manipulate valves and change how the water flows to see if we could maintain pressure. And when we talk about the lower zone, that's really that south and then all east end of town. So there are things we can try and explore, but usually when you move water, there are a lot of consequences when you pull that string. That's why having an analysis with this water master plan makes a lot of sense. The other thing that is valuable with the water master plan is it is funded by the Wyoming Water Development Commission. If they make recommendations, say, to increase the available supply for the area, and that would be through a well, then we could go to Wyoming Water Development to have that well funded through a level 2 or level 3 study. And if it's supported in the level 1 master plan study, the success of that is pretty high. Now, that's a timely pursuit, but I think we take less risk when we're looking at opening a great facility for the community, but then wondering if we're going to have enough pressure to get down to the east end of town for people to water their own yards.
You agree this is a little bit premature then until we find out a little bit more?
Yes. I mean, as much as I would like to see this through sooner the better, you know, just because there's certain things that we can do and we can get moving. I mean, the land is essentially up for grabs. If somebody comes and offers, you know, the Guard Enterprises, you know, $500,000, it's gone, and this opportunity would be gone. But again, and I'd like to say, you know, our project can also wait until, you know, that You know, 'cause if it's meant to be, you know, it'll happen. And we're not going to get any grass growing this fall, and we're not going to get a lot of this stuff just because of the amount of time contracts would take and that type of thing. So it would be disappointing if it was tabled, I guess, you know, till that information can come in. But I would much rather see green grass down there than, you know, something falter and it not work out, you know. I guess one thing I would mention that the potential for that well, if that well, if we were to buy the land, you know, that well, would that be a potential spot for that? I mean, at the location, you know, because the city would eventually own it then, having that easement and ability to do that.
Your Honor, at this time, I think that would be a great location. I mean, we'd have to look into it a little bit as far as the viability, but you know, having it at close proximity would make sense.
So maybe I'll amend my motion to do all but the soccer, and then it can be relooked at even at the September funding.
Okay. Let's see, that was your motion. Do you want to accept that as a
Yes, I would agree.
change to the motion? So we're talking about funding the others, as we've discussed, and then holding off on soccer for right now. I know that especially Leo was like, we put him off last time, we don't want to put him off again, and so I hear you. I was there and I heard, so I get that, but I also, I mean.
Well, I think they need to know we support that, but we need to make sure we have our ducks in a row to do that.
It's understandable.
And I don't think we can do it soon enough to
Right.
do it on this.
Okay, so right now, the motion as it stands is to fund, thank you very much, Mr. Saltzgaber, is to fund Brunton International 76,286, Legacy Foam 90,000, Media Adventure Queen 3,464. In terms of discussion, part of the discussion had been, number one, 65,000 of future funding. If we're not going to be funding youth soccer right now, nothing is going to be encumbered of future funding. We actually would have, theoretically, 60,000 that we could decide we wanted to put in towards something else or we wanted to save for later. So, I mean, for example, in terms of the recommendation for Brunton, that was coming from limited funds. Do we want to just go forward with what we've got, or do we want to suggest the possibility of further funding Brunton to get them closer to their goal, or honestly saving the money? Because as it stands, if we were to fund 60,000 more, we're then at nothing for the next.
I think we ought to just move forward with the amounts that we have.
Okay. All right.
Your Honor, just
ma'am.
as a point of clarification for staff then, so this 125,000 that's recommended for Riverton Youth Soccer, are we earmarking that or pinning that for confirmation at a later time? Or are we going to require that that be presented to the Edge Committee once they have further information or additional information?
I guess that's up to the, what do you want to do?
I think that's up to the water.
Your Honor, I'm fine with earmarking that. At least, you know, give them some time to get that figured out. And if not, then we can reallocate it
Okay.
at a future time.
That works.
Yeah.
That's a motion, and that's a second.
It is.
So the motion was funding as recommended except for youth soccer, and now we have a motion to fund, not fund, but set aside 125,000.
Point of order, could we take action on the first motion before we have this other one?
Yeah, let's do that. I like that. Good idea. All right, on the motion regarding Brunton Legacy Foam Media Adventure Queen, funding is recommended by Edge. All in favor say aye.
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 I vote aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, that motion passes. And then, you had a motion.
Yes, Your Honor. I move that we hold the 125 for Riverton Youth Soccer as an earmarked item until they can decide how the water issue is going to be handled.
Clear enough motion, Ms. Harris?
Yes, sir.
You second that?
I second that.
All right, so we have a motion from Councilwoman Borders, seconded by Councilman Paranto, to keep a hold of $125,000 for future use. All right.
And Your Honor, maybe just as a comment, I hate to belabor the point, we will work expeditiously on this because we support this idea and concept. And it doesn't mean we have to wait to the end of the master plan to get that information. We'll see what we can do independently of that, but I think it makes sense to also use the master plan to our advantage. But I don't want to give the impression that we have to wait till the master plan is published before we can give an answer.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, that passes. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your Honor, for clarification, will that just be allocated then to Riverton Youth Soccer if the water situation is resolved, or does it need to come back before council for approval?
I think we would need to still vote to allocate it. We're just saying we're not going to let our balance get below 125,000. I mean, it will be, because we're saying that 65 of this is future encumbrance. But if I'm not mistaken, that would be, the way to handle this would be just to say, we're going to make sure our balance doesn't get below 125, and we'll come back. We don't have to have probably a full presentation or anything like that, but just that we're showing our intention to keep a hold of it.
Great, thank you, Your Honor.
Sound good? Clear enough? Clear enough?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Council committee reports, council members roundtable. Let's start with you, Councilman Paranto.
Your Honor, I don't have any committee reports to report on. Our next airport board meeting will be at looks like it's going to be the 25th of this month.
You don't have any exciting personal news or things going on in your life that you'd like to share with anyone?
Not that I already did, right? Yes, okay, so I'm a grandfather now, thank you to my children, as of Friday. So,
All right.
yes, thank you.
You don't just have to report on airport board meetings, although those are riveting to discuss.
They are indeed.
New grandbabies are fun too.
Thank you.
All right. Councilman Larson?
Solid Waste entered into a single agreement with the tribal entity and for an extension of 6 months so that we can get the contract between both tribes and parties together at one time. And we're waiting for the approval of that. That was the only thing since our last meeting on solid waste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Councilwoman Salisbury?
I've not attended any meetings since our last meeting. I was out of town for my son got married this weekend in Sheridan. That was lovely. So maybe I'll be a grandparent sometime soon. But I had so many people from the community call in support of our police officers over the last couple weeks and all that they do, and just support and personal stories on how they've been there for them. And so I think the community really is aware of what our police officers are going through and doing for our community, and I really do appreciate that. Also, I had a lot of people with the community with the rezoning, so I appreciate the community being involved and showing their support for our city staff, our police officers, and just to make, get our community on the right track, so.
Thank you. Councilwoman Borders?
Your Honor, as mentioned earlier, the Finance Committee met. That's the only meeting that I've had. I do want to mention Paws and Pearls. That's coming up September 9th. So make plans to attend that. On a personal note, it was a lot of fun today. I went to the fair and watched my granddaughter show goats. They're so hilarious. If you get a chance to go watch a goat show, you really should go. I also want to voice my support. I love that we have officers in the back of the room, and just know we appreciate you. I want you to know that above anything else. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Councilman Bailey?
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, I did not have any other meetings that I attended either. And again, like Carlos said, the fair is in full swing, and so there's tons and tons of activities that people need to take advantage of. There's lots of fun stuff to do, lots of neat exhibits, lots of events every night. So, I mean, there's lots of great, fun stuff to do. And on a personal note, I had my daughter and 2 grandchildren here for the last month, and so that livened our household up dramatically with a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, so.
Oh, boy.
It's eerily quiet there now, though. They had to go back home to California, where it's hotter than blazes, so.
I've been by your house when it's quiet. I bet it's
Yeah.
different when it's loud.
It is. So, thank you. That's all I
Your
got.
Honor, if I could mention one more thing, the National Night Out that the police department had, phenomenal job. It looked like a great turnout, and I think it's great. I love how they moved it to the fairgrounds. I think that really helped with attendance, and so thank you to the chief and the whole force.
We had some
Again.
people that were willing to get dunked there, too, that I think are sitting in the back. No?
I have a picture of our police last night at the fair.
Oh, yeah.
That I told them I'd be sharing, so. But
And I guess one other thing too, there is an effort to revitalize the police foundation, which
Yes.
has been in existence for a while, but we're sort of getting that re-going. So anybody that's interested in helping, probably get with probably Kyle or the chief. And so again, I think the community's very strongly behind the police department, and anything we can do to help them do their job and to be safer, I think we're all in favor of. So, thanks.
All right, Mr. Butterfield?
Your Honor, I'll be brief. There is a planning commission on Thursday night at 5:30 that's scheduled. And then we don't have any of the standing committees coming up before our next meeting. And I'll just jump on and say, I think the National Night Out was a lot of fun. A lot of credit to Furtado and his team for putting that on. It was fun to see the officers out there. And a lot of credit to our community for getting together, and I commend the chief for coming in very short order, integrating himself with community stakeholders, making this thing happen. And, you know, while we're throwing out praise, I think a hard job for the city as the chief of police, but being the chief's wife's pretty tough. And Amy Hurtado is pretty amazing, and she did a lot for this event too. So I thought it was really positive.
Yeah. I sure enjoyed it. I don't think I've ever been in a dunking booth before, but it's a singular experience, especially for a hot day. Don't you think, Brandon? It was actually kind of fun. I didn't mind it. Better than the jackalope jump in the wintertime. I will say that you have to be careful not to put any weight on the end of it, I learned. Because if you put any weight on the end of that seat, it will knock you in, even if nobody hits it. And so I had a kid that I think he thinks I was scared of him, and I just dunked myself twice when he was trying to throw a ball. Anyway. Okay, in terms of things from me, I guess, enjoyed the National Night Out. I think that was a really good event. I appreciate our chief jumping in and being willing to jump into that. I guess part of the whole point of that is to try to develop a better relationship between the community and our law enforcement officers, better relationship between our community, our first responders. You know, heck, if part of what we get from it is that we have some kids that see officers in uniform and are a little bit more excited to maybe become a police officer someday, great. I'd love it. I did try to get us some new police officers while I was there. I talked to Andy Hansen, saw if he'd come out of retirement. He said no. But it was a good opportunity, and I really appreciate the work that went into it, and I really appreciate our officers who went over there and made themselves known, made themselves visible, willing to visit with the public, willing to entertain some kids, willing to entertain some adults who sometimes act like kids. That wasn't a reference to me. That was more so Mike. Just kidding. We did get a report, so I guess a couple of things. We had our EDGE meeting, and I would like to say I really appreciate Mr. Kosarag for chairing that and taking that over. We've appreciated your hard work in that. As I've gone to those meetings, and I haven't been able to get to all of them, regrettably, I've been impressed with how much EDGE asks and thinks about each of these funding requests, and I think we're well served. We have a lot of other committees that people serve in the community, and I guess just everybody that does that, they put a lot of work in, and it's all behind the scenes. It's nothing that people really even see or know. The Rendezvous Balloon Rally, for example, that's a pretty small committee of people that make that happen miraculously every year. And so really appreciate the hard work of our citizens and our community in general, but also that serve on our citizen committees. We do have an executive session. So I guess we're at 9:48. I would entertain a motion to reconvene into executive session. Is that the best way to put it? Sure.
I'll second.
A motion by Councilman Bailey, second by Councilman Peranto. Discussion, what were you wanting to say, Mr. Bailey? Okay.
I moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 I vote aye. Any opposed, say nay. We are convened into executive session at 9:48 PM. And I would invite Mr. Butterfield, Ms. Harris,
And Chief.
and the Chief of Police.
And Your Honor, I know we just convened, but could you at least read the purpose for which we're going into executive?
Thank you, sir. I want to make sure this is clear on the record, so
I didn't know I was there.
in the recording. Thank you, sir. Executive session for the purposes of personnel pursuant to Wyoming statute 164405 and 164405, I'm sorry, 164405A Romanet 2, 164405A Romanet 10. And that was, is that your motion then, Councilman Bailey? Second by Councilman Peranto. We good? Thank you. We are back in regular session at 11:47.
Mike's not.
PM. We good there? Everybody here? Good to go.
Yep.
Okay, we don't have any action items. I guess what I will say is, number one, we have spent a lot of time, and that's not just tonight, talking about our police department. We have spent a lot of time thinking about our police department. Mr. Butterfield and Chief Hurtado have put a lot of work into a lot of different ideas that we have looked at and considered. When it comes to personnel and kind of how things work in terms of how folks are paid, the way that our city ordinance works is that for the most part, we empower our city administrator to make the best decisions, but he has to do it with the concurrence of the council. So a lot of what we've been discussing is, what are we going to do? What does the council agree with doing? Mr. Butterfield, Chief Hurtado came with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different proposals. They have a plan of action. They have some really good ways that we can go forward. They have our support. I guess, what do you need to add to that, Mr. Butterfield?
Well, I want to say thanks for people that stuck around as long as they did. And I want to say thanks to you for your work, for Mia for providing financial analysis, for Chief Hurtado for doing the same, and for fighting for employees, because I can attest that he does that. I'm excited that we have a consensus of the council to move forward with an opportunity to provide a financial incentive in the form of a bonus, and then also to reclassify how our police department employees are currently classified. We do need to establish new job descriptions. We need to establish the parameters of those classifications. The purpose of a pay scale is to ensure that we're not arbitrary and capricious when we compensate our employees across the board. So we're going to invest more time into ensuring that those job descriptions are established, the parameters are established, that our employees know very clearly how to advance through the pay scale that we're going to propose and work on. And we appreciate the concurrence that's been provided for the options we've looked at.
Okay. Well, we're not trying to be vague, but there's still things that need to be finalized. There are changes that are going to be made. And I guess keep posted. This is not something where you're going to be dragged off and told, hey, we'll take care of it someday. We actually do have a plan of action with some specifics, and Mr. Butterfield and Chief Hurtado can kind of get some of those out as we get a little bit more aware of them. But we're doing what we can to make sure that our officers are going to have more of, I think, the recognition they deserve. So, all right. I would say then, if we don't have any objection, anybody want to move to adjourn? We could do it
Move
that
to
way.
adjourn.
I think we should take the opportunity to be here at 12:01. You know, since we've
I-
done
That's
it
what
all.
I said.
Unless you guys want to.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 11:51 PM.
Write it down as 12:01.